All right, all right. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone out there. Good evening, even for some of you folks. Um, Welcome to the virtual A Game Studio. It's your boy Adi, and we're here to kick off season 2 of Underdogs into Winners. And just to give you guys a little bit of background for those of you who didn't have a chance to hop on and pay attention to kind of like One Salting and kind of our first collaboration, we had a chance to interview some of the One Salting mentees who were able to break into tech from non-target schools, and talk about kind of how they got in, as well as how are they able to pay it forward ultimately to other people through One Salting's various initiatives. So we're back. We're excited to do season 2, except this time we're doing live stream. So you have a chance to get that fan interaction as well. So without further introduction, our first guest speaker, she's from Dallas. She is currently a Stanford student. She has endless amount of internships, those ranking from Cisco to now Facebook. She's a pleasant person, as well as she has a glowing and booming YouTube channel. So without further ado, everyone welcome Bihan to the stream. How's it going, Bihan?
Hi, thanks for the warm welcome. Great to meet everyone and happy to share some of my experiences today.
No problem. So yeah, for those of you who are on, let us know where you're from. Where are you tuning in from? For sure. Do you think more people from California or Dallas are going to show up? Just a prediction. What do you think?
Probably California. I feel like California is more students, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
For sure. Do you feel like you keep in touch with a lot of people from Dallas still, or no?
I honestly don't keep in touch with that many people from Dallas. Like, I went to a boarding high school, and most of the people I went to high school with, I don't really keep in contact with. So most of my friends now are college friends.
No, that makes sense. And that's crazy to think about, right? It's like, in each chapter in life, you feel like these are going to be like my lifelong friends, kind of like, we're going to see, do all these crazy things. And it's like, just whether like, people move on for college, or kind of work, or just do different things. You're like, dang, it's been like 3-4 years and I haven't even talked to this person since like, algebra, right? So it's just crazy how time goes by fast like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you just grow so much as a person in college, and you just don't have like those same commonalities a lot of the times with like your high school friends anymore, which I mean, it's fine. Like, everyone grows and like, turns into different people. So
most definitely. It looks like we got some representation from the Bay Area. That's what's up. And we got Michigan. Shout out to Genevieve. She's the only person I know probably from Michigan. But no, it's always good to see what's up. It's always good to hear from the A Game team. Cool. Well, let's get into it, Bihan. So what were you like in high school? Like, kind of, were you like the quiet, introverted person just minding your own business, or were you like this out and about kind of, very rebellious individual?
yeah, I think there were kind of 2 phases, since I went to public high school for 2 years and then I went to boarding high school for 2 years. And I think I was very different people during both of those times. So I was, so in public high school, that was 9th and 10th grade. I think I was more extroverted, outgoing, and kind of bubbly. I would be like very active and like talking to people and like being involved in like extracurriculars, and like I was in marching band, I played the flute, and just overall like very, very like extroverted. And I think this changed a little bit once I went to boarding school. So I went to the Texas Academy of Math and Science for junior and senior years of high school. And so this was a 2-year boarding school on a college campus. And most of the students were like from Texas. So all of the students were from Texas. And so they had 200 students per year. So 200 juniors and 200 seniors, all living in the same dorm. And it was like math and science focused, like you can tell by the name. So this was a really different environment from my high school, because only people who were really like passionate about like STEM and like research were applying to the school. And so it was like pretty self-selecting, and people were like very competitive, and there was like a very like almost like toxic culture of like competitiveness. And so I think in that type of culture, a lot of people have issues like being more like outgoing and like extroverted because like a lot of people aren't really there to like make friends or like be social. They're just there to like study, to do research, and to like try to get into a good college. And so I think during this time I became more introverted and kind of like just put my head down and like did my work. But I think that was more of a factor of like the environment I was in. Like I did make like a couple of really great friends that I do still talk to, but I think definitely like in college I've had to like unlearn some of those habits from those 2 years in high school.
No, that's really important. And, before we continue, shout out to Hira Foster, from San Leandro. He's been dying for a shout out, so had to shout out the boy, even though he's in Sacramento right now. Hashtag not Bay Area. But anyways, no, that's really interesting that you touched upon that, right? So kind of let's break that down a little bit more. So kind of like what went into the decision, to kind of switch schools halfway through high school, right? Because when you think about high school, right, like the like the learning and the academic part of it's one, but like the actual environment is really what determines if you're comfortable or not. So kind of, like what went into, wanting to make that move? Like, was that like your own decision? Did your parents play a part? Like, kind of what were like some factors? Because that's a big decision, at a young age. So like, talk to us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it was definitely a big decision. And I thought a lot about it. I was like very conflicted about it for a long time. So I think there were a few different factors. So one of the people that I really looked up to in high school, he was a year above me and he went to TAMS, like the boarding school as well. And he had like a really great experience. And so like hearing about his experience and like some of the opportunities that he was able to have and pursue was convincing, as well as they have a lot of like presentation days where you go there for a day, like on a Saturday, and they like walk you through campus, talk to you about like the classes, like the research, the clubs. And something that was really appealing was the research aspect. Since you're on a college campus, you have access to all these different professors and like the university resources and libraries and like databases. And it was just way more resources than like most high schools would have. And I think that was really appealing because I think in high school, sometimes it's hard to like stand out or find these extracurricular opportunities like research if your high school doesn't have the resources or they don't connect you. So that was like one of the most appealing parts for me. I was already very interested and passionate about tech. So I knew I wanted to do something STEM related, which was why I wanted to go to TAMS and then do research and then learn more about different areas within tech.
That's awesome. I think kind of you talked about what I really found interesting was like how you went from this extroverted, bubbly person to like, it's like you're in a more cutthroat environment with these other folks, right? And so would you say like in high school, did you face a lot more like internal pressure that you put on yourself, or was it like the environment, like parents, kind of family, like was pushing on you where it's like, you had to be this stellar student because like that's just kind of what we do, or kind of like talk to us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I definitely think most of the pressure was internal. Like I think like maybe my experience was a little bit different than like other students at TAMS in that like my parents were really hands off. Like they didn't like really pressure me to do anything or like give me a hard time or like make me feel like pressured in really any way to do anything. And I think part of it was I've always been like very like internally motivated and like hard on myself, and so I think like they never really saw a need to like also like add pressure to me. So I think they like always like trusted that I would like act in like my best judgment and do what I needed to do. So I think, I mean, this is good and bad. I think it's like good to have like internal motivation and like I guess self-discipline, but also like sometimes I feel like I probably was like too hard on myself and I would like beat myself up over like small things, or like if something didn't go perfectly, I would like be very upset with myself. And I think like looking back, that wasn't like the best mindset to have. And I think just allowing myself to have more room for growth and more like accepting of like making mistakes or like not being perfect is like definitely like a healthier mindset that I'm adopting like now in college.
No, that's important. I think, mental health is something, I think it's still, we're only scratching the surface as far as like, the implications and like, the aftermath of not taking care of that, right? So I guess kind of how did you like, I guess kind of find like, what was your escape? Like kind of like your outlet for like non-school related things when you're in this environment where, like you said, it was very cutthroat. You didn't really have too many friends because, you guys are all kind of vying for the same thing in essence, right? A chance to go to these top schools. Like kind of like, how did you like, get comfortable ultimately? Or did you like never feel like you were at home in that environment?
Yeah, it was hard. I think I did have a couple of good friends that like we all like were very like self-motivated, and we had like a lot of common interests, but we also like did prioritize like our friendship and like connecting and like helping each other out. And so I think like I did find like an escape in like the really good friends that I did make. And a lot of the times a form of escape would just be like hanging out with them and like getting boba or like getting food. We would be able to like talk about whatever was like stressing us out. And then another area of escape, I guess, was I guess like in high school I used to like read a lot and like watch like shows. And so I would like indulge in those also as like a form of escape. But unfortunately, since college has started, I haven't had enough time to read as much for pleasure, which is something I hope to change.
For sure. No, kind of moving along, right? So, as you're wrapping up high school, kind of, for college, right? That's a big decision for a lot of people. Like, like kind of like, what about, Stanford ultimately was like, you felt like this is like the best place for you, and kind of like, what was that process like, ultimately like going through the application process, going through like, kind of figuring out what were the other options, kind of, ultimately why Stanford?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so I think just a little bit of background. Stanford was my dream school since 7th grade.
Wow.
And so this was because we went on a road trip from like Dallas to California to visit some relatives over there. And along the way, we like went on a bunch of different like college visits. And so the first college I ever visited was Stanford. And then I just like absolutely fell in love with like, the environment and like the campus, and like the people were all like really nice. And like just like seeing like the palm trees, like there's like the iconic like kind of drive down of like Palm Avenue where you see like the Stanford buildings like framed by like all the palm trees. And
Right.
like wow, like I have to come here. And so that's always been like in the back of my mind as I went like through high school. Like I knew I wanted like to go to Stanford, like especially since I was interested in like STEM and like technology. Like I think Stanford has like a really strong engineering school and like very strong computer science department. So those were all different factors. When I was making my decision, I was deciding between a few different schools. So I was deciding between Stanford, Princeton, and then a dual degree program at UPenn.
Oh, wow.
And so the dual degree programs, it's called the Jerome Fisher program for management and technology. So it's like a double degree between Wharton and engineering.
Oh, wow.
And so I was really conflicted because like I knew like each school had like really great, opportunities. And I think it ultimately came down to what area I wanted to like pursue in the future. So I think breaking it down, I think Princeton is like really strong in like research, and like if I wanted to go like more of like the academia or like research route, I think I would have picked Princeton. And then like UPenn, if I wanted to go more of like the finance route, I probably would have picked UPenn. But I think ultimately my interest in tech is like what made me choose Stanford over the other schools, because like I've just always been really interested in technology, and I knew like no matter what I did in the future, even if it wasn't directly related to technology, I wanted to be close to technology and like around like the culture and like the innovation.
No, that's great. And let's break that down a little bit more. I know you mentioned like technology's been like an interest for a long time, but I guess kind of where does that stem from? Is it just like kind of you grew up around other people who worked in tech? Like, tech was just something that stood out to you? Let's talk to us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so there were many different factors in my life, I think, that made me interested in tech. So one factor was my parents. So both of my parents studied computer science and worked in software engineering for a period of time. And additionally, I was always a huge Star Wars fan growing up. So in fourth grade, I think that's when I saw my first Star Wars movie, and I just like absolutely fell in love with like the whole like world of Star Wars with like the futuristic technology and all of like the cool spaceships. And I just like thought, wow, like how can I be like a part of this, and like make my like little tiny piece of like that universe. And so I think my like love for Star Wars is like what actually like pushed me to like pursue like more the tech and like engineering side. So because of Star Wars, I was interested in like doing STEM research. And so like when I was at TAMS, I like did 2 years of computational chemistry research. And like it was pretty cool because there were like lots of applications, including like using like the different chemistry like concepts and like different chemicals as fuels. And so yeah, just like tying like my love for Star Wars with like different applications and like research was really interesting and like motivating for me. But yeah, so like when I was doing research, like I had like a little bit of exposure to computer science, and I took a couple of computer science classes, but it wasn't really until I got into Stanford and I started taking CS classes at Stanford that I really kind of saw like the massive like scope of like what could be possible. And yeah, so I went to Stanford, took some CS classes, and like never looked back, basically.
May the force be with you, pretty much. No, that's great.
Yeah.
I think no, I think Star Wars is like it's iconic like series, and I think for me even to like Transformers, like you grow up like you've seen like Star Wars, Transformers. What else was popping? Like Star Trek. I think all these other shows you like kind of really opens up your vision for like what's possible. I think technology really allows for truly amazing and innovative things to go on. So that's great. It's kind of like so you get to Stanford, you get started. Kind of what is that like? Because like you mentioned, like so Stanford really is arguably one of the best schools in the world, right? So when you're qualified rightfully in your own right, but it's like you're now around other people who are qualified in their own right too. So kind of is there a level of imposter syndrome, or kind of what's going through your head when you first start at a prestigious institution?
Yeah, definitely. There was definitely like a lot of imposter syndrome. Like I think in high school even I also felt imposter syndrome because everyone who was coming to like TAMS were like, like the top kids from their high schools. And so all of us in like this one like school with like they didn't have academic ranking either. So it was like I think that like made it like even more competitive because you like didn't really know exactly where you stood.
Right.
So I was a little bit like used to like that like pressure cooker environment, but then like after getting to Stanford, like it was like magnified because all these kids were like doing amazing things like in high school, and like they were like they had like their own companies, like they had like nonprofits, like they I don't know like published like 5 books. Like these people were all like doing like really amazing things, and I felt like a little bit out of place, and I was always worried that people would think that I wasn't like smart enough or that I didn't like have like the same like potential to succeed. And I think a lot of it was also because I wanted to do computer science. I came to Stanford wanting to do computer science, but I didn't do computer science in high school. So like a lot of people come to Stanford to pursue the things that they were like excelling at in high school. And so it was like different because I kind of like did a 180 from like research and like chemistry to like computer science, and like I was starting out from like kind of ground zero, whereas a lot of the people who were doing like computer science competitions or like coding or like making their own projects in high school already had like these years of experience ahead of me. And so I think that also magnified the sense of imposter syndrome a little bit because you know, when you're in a freshman dorm and like you're kind of talking to people in your hall, and then people talk about, oh, like I sold my company last week for like $10 million. You're just like, am I in the right place? So
Right. I
yeah.
can imagine. No, that's interesting you say that, right? Because I think, ironically enough, I think college is the perfect launching pad, right? In the sense, it's like, yes, like, there are going to be people who, who are more experienced and kind of, they know what they want. But it's also a chance for you, like, to figure out as individuals, it's like, I'm in an environment where I can really explore, what makes me tick as a person, right? What makes me tick? Like, what do I want to do? And I think it's really important that people truly take the time to figure that out, because otherwise it's like you're investing time, you're investing money. You got to figure out what's the right for you. But I think, yeah, it's pretty interesting. Like, I can't imagine, like, dang, across the hall, someone just stole their startup for $10 million. That must have been quite the sight. So I guess kind of like, how did you, I guess, kind of find your footing ultimately, though? Like, do you feel?
Yeah, I think the good thing about Stanford and college in general is that, once you're at college, I mean, depending on like what kind of high school you went to, people are much more open and much more like willing to, like make friends, and like they don't really care that much about competition, since, everyone in college is doing their own thing. Like usually your success isn't like correlated with someone else's success. Like just because someone else is successful doesn't mean like there's like one less spot for you to be successful. So I think that was part of it, being able to make a lot of really good friends early on in college, and kind of like rediscovering like the more like extroverted side of me. That was really helpful, both in terms of like getting my footing and kind of exploring different areas that I was potentially interested in. So like I went into college kind of interested in like both like computer science and econ, and like after like making friends in like both like departments and like taking classes with them, like that also helped me figure out exactly what I wanted to do.
No, that's really important. I really believe, in the law of abundance. Like you said, it's like your success doesn't take away from mine, right? And I think it's like we only see the finished product, right? Even for like, I remember in college, it's like, for example, like someone will say like, oh, I didn't study, or like I studied really hard and I got an A, or but I didn't study, right? So it's like you don't see what goes behind the scenes. So it's like for you to kind of question, kind of like, feel bad about someone's end result, I don't think makes sense, because you don't know what went into it. Right. And I think the best you can do is just kind of be the best version of yourself. And I think kind of the way you talked about that, I think is important. So I'm glad to hear you say that.
Yeah. And I think part of it is also like having the perspective of like slope is more important than like intercept. So like everyone is like starting out with like a different, like at a different place, like on like the y-axis, right? But then your rate of like improvement, or like the amount of like work that you put in, is like your slope. And so like if you just have like a slightly higher slope than someone, you're eventually going to like catch up to them or like pass them.
Exactly. It's a marathon, as Nipsey Hussle says. I think it's like, just focus on constant improvement, and you'll get to where you want to be. But no, I think kind of from your experience, right, it's like you've had a chance to intern in like a vast amount of roles, from both like the business side, now software engineering. I know you just wrapped up your internship at Cisco. So like talk to us about how you've been able to go back and forth. I think it's pretty interesting kind of, you've been able to kind of tap into both sides of your interest, from a business side as well as tech being software. So yeah, talk to us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So I think just like a brief overview of like the work experience that I've had. So the summer after sophomore year, I did a software engineering internship at Northrop Grumman. And then after sophomore year, I did an internship at Facebook in New York on the Instagram machine learning team. And then this past summer, I did a business analyst internship at Cisco. And so I think the main things that allowed me to, I guess, switch back and forth was just starting early and like talking to the right people to like figure out, what exactly these roles entailed, why I was interested in them, and being able to sell myself as someone who could like contribute to both equally. So I think, for computer science, it was easier since, I had like a CS background, I had like technical experience. And so, most CS majors like go on to do like software engineering roles anyways. So that was like more straightforward. But then for business, I first developed an interest in business and like consulting after finishing my software engineering internship at Facebook. And like during that time, I was able to take on more of like a leadership role as like a side project to my like main internship project. I was able to like work with different engineers to like build out like this pipeline. And so having that like interaction with like different divisions and kind of like organizing like a project from like end to end, that made me really interested in like more of like the high level like strategy behind why engineerings are making the like products and like decisions that they are. And so this was this was like my main motivation to go into like consulting and like business. And so I think for business and consulting, they don't really care what your background is. Like they hire more than just econ majors and like business majors. So I was actually originally going to do a consulting internship with LEK Consulting in New York.
Oh, wow.
And that got canceled due to coronavirus. And so I think a lot of people, got their internships canceled or like their full-time jobs canceled or like pushed back. And so, this was during April when it was like the first kind of wave of like layoffs and canceled internships and jobs. And so this was, like a lot of people were re-recruiting during this time. And so after going through a re-recruiting process, that's how I actually landed my internship with Cisco as a business analyst. So it was a little bit unconventional, like the recruiting route that I took to get to Cisco. But I think in terms of like background, like it doesn't really matter like what kind of background you have, as long as you have the skills to, pass the interview and like do the job, which is like someone from any background can like do.
That's great, and I think that's important to talk about. Right? I think we'll get into like networking, kind of going about that in a little bit. But I think the next thing I'd love to get your thoughts on was like kind of the remote work, right? Yeah. For example, like for someone like me, like I think it's more of it's not as bad because I had a chance to work with these people, for a couple of months at least before we transitioned to like permanent, like temporary permanent working from home, right? Now, for someone like yourself, as when you think of internships, and I look back to my college career, like I love the ability to kind of just be around people, right? Like with your fellow interns, you get to know, it's a whole experience, right? Yeah. It's more than the actual work. So kind of like talk to us about kind of like how that was like fully being remote, because I'm sure you felt like isolated more than anything like during this time.
Yeah, for sure. And I think remote work is something that is so different for like so many people depending on their home environment or like wherever they're working from. And so like I was like working at home for my whole internship with Cisco, and I had like a pretty like nice environment, like my room, like I had like a desk and like good Wi-Fi, so like nothing really like preventing me like externally from like doing work. But I think like you mentioned, a lot of it is like you want that social interaction with people, especially if you're meeting people for the first time online. It's harder to build those connections and to really communicate effectively. Because I think, when you're in the office, if you have a question, you can just like go walk over to their desk and like ask them. But now you have to, set up a meeting on their calendar. Like you can't find any like time on their calendar. You have to like send them a message, like meet during like off work hours. And it's just, there's just like such a big communication barrier a lot of the times, especially if you're in a business role where a lot of the work depends on, effective communication and like collaboration with different teams.
So I think preaching to the choir.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so like there was definitely like a communication barrier, I think, during my internship. So both with, other interns, it was really hard to like make friends with other interns because, sure, we would have like social events set up like maybe once per week, but then these calls would be like 25 people like doing like a social event, and you like don't really actually get to talk to anyone. And, even if you do set up one-on-one calls with people, like you just talk to them for 30 minutes and maybe you like do this like 2 or 3 times, but it's like not the same as like, you know, getting lunch with them or like hanging out with them after work every day. So it's definitely like a big like hindrance to, you know, the social aspect and like the communication aspect. And it can also really impact your like job performance. So I think a lot of people can relate to the burnout of like Zoom fatigue or like video call fatigue. And also just like not being as motivated when you're in your bedroom and your like bed is like right next to your desk and you don't have meetings until like 1 p.m. So you sleep until like noon. So it's having that structured work environment, I think is like super important, like for me, at least for like my productivity. And then I guess like a piece of advice I would give to people who are doing remote work is to over communicate with your manager. So a lot of the times they're only going to like check in with you like once or twice a week just to see how you're doing, but it's kind of on you to reach out if you have any roadblocks or if you have any questions or if you just need more communication. And so I think a lot of the times, even if you're doing the work and you're, you know, like being like very productive and efficient, like people can't see that. Like people don't see you doing the work. They just see you like in those like 1 or 2 meetings a week where they're calling you. But a lot of the work that you're doing is going to go unnoticed unless you like self promote yourself, especially like when you're virtual.
No, 100%. I think that's great advice because again, like you said, managers usually have a lot on their plate, right? Because they have their own work, their own direct manager that they have to report to, and like, you know, the more you can make it easier for them, just let them know what's going on. I think it's the best. But the other thing I wanted to touch upon was like, you're right. With like remote working, it's tough because it's like you're managing your life while working too, right? Because when you're in the office, it's like give or take, your main priority at that time, like those 8 hours or so, is working. Right now, it's like, you know, when you're collaborating with, you know, other people, like, you know, people who are parents, you know, they have to take care of their kids or their spouse. They have to make lunch. You know, they have to do these other things while, you know, still working during the workday. So it's tough. And I think people are more mindful of that, which I think is good. You know, I think some people, you know, probably aren't the nicest, but other people, you know, I think are pretty lenient. And you have to be, right? Because these are like unprecedented times. You know, I think if you were to ask people beginning of the year, like everyone's going to be working from home, they probably would have been like, you're kidding me right now, right? So it's definitely tough. So I guess the next question, right? You know, I think this may put you on the spot as a heads up, but don't. But of all your internship experiences, right? Is there like one particular experience that stood out to you, or maybe it's like your favorite internship so far?
So I think there are like different factors of each internship that were like amazing. But if you're asking about like overall like best internship impression, I still think like my sophomore year internship at Facebook, that was probably my favorite for a lot of different reasons and like not all of them like work related. So first, I really like, you know, like a fast-paced environment, and you know that was in New York, so like that was already like a huge bonus for me. Like I pushed hard to like get my offer switched from like the Menlo Park office to the New York location. And so, you know, being in New York, and like, you know, public transportation is really great. Like food is amazing. You know, Broadway, it's just like I'm just like in love with like New York as a city. And so like that was like a large impression on me. But also in terms of work, you know, in terms of like having like a fast paced work style, I think, you know, Facebook is known for, you know, kind of a startup feel and like moving fast and breaking things. And I think I really liked that work style. And I think, you know, even though I was doing software engineering, I was, since we were like, you know, not virtual, I was still able to have like social interaction with different people. So like, you know, my friends, like fellow interns, like other people on my team. And so I think it would have been like way different, you know, if it was virtual. Because, you know, like software engineering kind of just as a profession, you're less, like you interact less with like people. You're like in less meetings. You are like focused kind of on your own code a lot of the time. And so it definitely would have been different if it was virtual versus like in person. But I think the in-person aspect of that internship was really great. And I think Facebook like puts a lot of effort into making like the in-office experience like very, very enjoyable, with like game rooms and like free food and like massage chairs. So, there were like a lot of different factors that kind of made that my favorite experience. But, there were like definitely highlights from like my other internships as well. Like I think at Cisco, like I definitely enjoyed the ability to talk to more different teams and have more insight across like a business, which was something that I didn't really get at either of my other internships. And, just being able to learn more about like strategy and like high level how businesses are run was also like really great, like at Cisco. Mm-hmm.
No, it's great. I think, talking about Facebook, right? I think that's like the $1 million question a lot of our viewers have today. It's kind of like, how do you break into Facebook? Like into kind of like, what are some best practices and the kind of advice you would recommend for like those aspiring, college students, professionals, like who want to break into Facebook? Kind of like, how would you go about it? Or how have you been able to go about it?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I think the most important thing, besides, like passing the technical interview is definitely like networking beforehand and networking early. Mm-hmm. Since, like Facebook and a lot of other like big tech companies, they kind of fill their spots on a rolling basis. And so the earlier you apply, like the easier it is, like the more spots there are going to be for you to get in. And so I'd recommend, start networking like maybe 3 or 4 months before the applications open. And so just getting to know people like maybe alumni or like second degree connections that, who've worked there or have interned there, like figuring out like what their experiences were getting in, as well as, what the job looks like. You want to make sure you can sell like why you want to work at Facebook versus like other companies. And then also, keeping those connections going. Like don't just like have like a one and done connection with someone to like get some information, but especially if you want like a referral, you need to like keep that connection ongoing and like establish that relationship. So by the time that the application's open, you have people that you've been talking to who are like happy to refer you. And additionally, like, I can talk a little bit about, like the interview prep, but I think it's pretty standard for like software engineering, like just understanding, data structures and algorithms and like doing a lot of practice problems is the best way to like prepare yourself for these interviews, especially at big tech companies. Like they have pretty standardized interview questions. And so if you just spend like a decent amount of time doing like LeetCode or like HackerRank, like interview question prep, like you should be fine for like the interview questions. But I think the hardest part is just like getting the interview in the first place, which is like why you need to have those like informational interviews and like relationships going into the recruiting cycle.
100%, that makes sense. And guys, show Bihan some love in the comments, if you thought that was valuable. Let's see that. No, I think it's important. I think preparation is key. So I guess kind of like, what are like how do you balance like the pressure in interviews? Because I think like people, they can prepare, but like also once you're in that environment, I think even now more so than before, it's like it's virtual, right? So you're kind of worried like, oh, is my internet gonna go out? Like like you're hoping like things like that don't come into play during the interview itself. But kind of like, would you say it's just like you've prepared so much over the years, so like now it's like when you're in an interview, it's like you're pretty poised, or like was that something you still like feel nerves about in an interview? How have you been able to kind of cope with that?
Yeah, I think it definitely gets better with practice. I remember my sophomore year, that was when I was doing a lot of these technical interviews for the first time. So I remember, my first couple of technical interviews, they were just really bad. I remember one of them, I got like halfway through the question in the time frame, and then the interviewer like gave me some feedback and they were like, maybe you should like learn Python.
Oh.
Well, I was interviewing in C++, which is
okay.
like kind of like, like harder to interview in. But like I remember like after that interview, I was just like so embarrassed and like I just like started crying, and then it was an experience. I think everyone kind of goes through, like bad interviews, and especially, at the beginning. Um, and so I think just having a lot of practice and applying to a lot of places, like even if you don't want to like 100% work there, like if you're even like slightly interested, you should apply like just to get that interview experience. And going through like 15, 20 interviews before you actually have that interview for your dream company is going to set you up for success, because you're confident, you're more more about like what's going to happen in the interview, what to expect. And you have like exposure to like different types of questions that you might not have like practiced before. Yeah, so just like having all of like the prior interview experience and like building upon that and like getting better each time is, I think, what's helped me maintain my pressure, like maintain my cool under pressure now. And I think it's like different a little bit for business or like consulting interviews. It's like, sure, you can do a bunch of different case studies, but also for these interviews you also need to really nail down like your behavioral interviews as well, and like know exactly like the value that you bring and like why you're interested in that company, their work, and like that industry. I think that's more of a highlight for like the non-tech internship or like full-time roles.
No, definitely, I agree. I think even like in the product and kind of business space, I think one of the ways to stand out, from what I've seen, is like ask questions back. For example, like kind of, I think what they want to see more so than the actual end result is kind of like your thought process, right? Because again, it's like, especially like in product and kind of business side, they'll ask some very arbitrary, ambiguous questions. So they're not expecting you to get the actual. I mean, ideally you get the answer, but like it's more so they want to see how would you tackle the solution, because there's going to be times where it's like in the workforce where it's like you have to answer these, you have to face these ambiguous problems like that are costing the company millions and possibly billions of dollars. So you have to figure out how to navigate that. So I think it's more just like, again, it's the ability to think and like structure your answers. I think is pretty key, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I think especially when you're in a virtual interview, like talking out loud when you're thinking is super important. Like there's kind of like the classic like market sizing questions or like case study questions, and you have to talk through like the structure that you're using to approach the question. And even if you're in person, you should like just talk through like the steps that you're thinking through, so that the interviewer can both know like what your thought process is, as well as like kind of like steer you in the right direction if you're a little bit off track.
Definitely no. And I think, kind of going back to like, I know you mentioned how like you had that one experience where like, it was like a setback, but it was like a learning experience. But like, as far as standing out, right, I think, I'm starting to see like a trend, I think, which is great, of, college students really taking advantage of LinkedIn, right? As far as posting like, personal content, engaging with content, doing, their own initiatives and whatnot. So it's like, I know, especially now, like with things being virtual, kind of like, what are some things you recommend candidates, college students do to like stand out during, not even just like the job search process, but this overall, I think from a long-term perspective too, kind of like what are some things you recommend people do to like stand out, like, to be successful?
Yeah, for sure. And I think during this time when everything's virtual, your online and your like digital presence is more important than ever, since it's basically your first impression for a lot of the companies and like the recruiters that you're going to be talking to. So, when recruiters are like interviewing you, like people like engineers or like whatever role you're applying for at the company are going to be looking at your LinkedIn profile. And a lot of the times they look at this more than your resume. And so like having your digital presence like fully fleshed out and like representative of like what you want to show people is going to be super important, like especially before going into like recruiting cycles and like talking to the recruiters. So there are a lot of different ways you can do this. Like the easiest way is just to be active on LinkedIn. Like you don't even need to post LinkedIn content, but just interacting with different posts or like resharing posts, and like having a fully fleshed out profile is going to be super helpful. Like a lot of people don't realize that their LinkedIn profile like if they don't complete like certain areas, like it's going to hinder them by a lot. So I think I read the statistic somewhere that something around like if you have a complete LinkedIn profile, you're 40 times as likely to receive opportunities through LinkedIn. And so when I saw this, it was really shocking. But then, like, you know, after using LinkedIn myself, like, I feel like it's like completely true. Like before I was active on LinkedIn, you know, like obviously like I was getting like 0 opportunities because like no one was finding my profile. I wasn't talking to people. I wasn't interacting with posts. So I wasn't like showing up on anyone's feed. But, you know, after I started posting, after I started, you know, commenting on other people's profiles, this changed like 1,000%. Like after, like in my experience, after my original consulting internship was canceled, I made a post on LinkedIn, you know, asking my network for help and like for resources to like go through the re-recruiting process, which was, you know, how I ended up getting that offer at Cisco and like a few different other opportunities. And kind of springboarding off of that, that's kind of where I realized the importance of LinkedIn and like posting and like creating content, which was like how I, you know, like got this opportunity and like got to meet like Jonathan from Onsulting and just like opening a lot of doors. So like my advice for people is to like, even if you're not going to like make content or like post, you know, like be active and like interacting and like commenting on people's posts and like resharing, and like have that complete LinkedIn profile.
A lot of gems right there. No, I think it's great to, you know, I think these things are not that hard to do. I think anyone can go like and comment people's posts. It doesn't take any skill per se. It's more just like, you know, discipline. And, you know, I think you just plant those seeds because you never know. Like, I mean, it's not like you were seeking like, you know, an active job role by liking and commenting someone's thing. It's just, you know, by virtue, you kind of just kept, you know, building your profile and like network out. And, you know, there you go. Obviously it came about. But no, like talk to us about how you got involved with Onsulting, ultimately, you know, how you met with Jonathan.
Yeah, so I was following Jonathan's content for maybe like 1 to 2 months before I reached out to him. So I was, you know, following his content, and at the same time, I had started, you know, posting some of my own content on LinkedIn, and I like started a YouTube channel. Like the channel name is like To Be Honest, like it's supposed to be like a pun on my name, but I don't know. I don't know if like people get it.
It's creative in my opinion, at least.
Thanks. But yeah, so I started posting videos there about like, you know, networking and recruiting and like internships, and like advice for like different like career paths and like kind of general like networking and internship advice. And I, you know, this is pretty in line with like what Jonathan does with like Onsulting and like helping connect people to different opportunities. And he was still at Cisco at the time when I contacted him. So it was a little bit easier because I was also at Cisco at the time. And so I could connect to him on like WebEx Teams. And so I sent him a message asking him for like a 15-minute like coffee chat. And, you know, he was like very generous and like we like called and, you know, he gave me a lot of great advice. And it was just like great talking to him because he had like a lot of great insights and we were doing kind of similar things, and it was just great hearing about his journey. So, you know, I didn't go into it with like the goal of like, you know, becoming a Onsulting mentee or being, you know, on his speaker series. I was just curious about, you know, his journey and how he was able to, you know, get to like where he is today. And, you know, like Jonathan's really amazing. He like really like watches out for people that he, you know, talks to and like knows and like is in his circle. And so he actually reached out to me a little bit later and asked if I wanted to be on his July speaker series, which was how I like first kind of got involved with like the Onsulting community at large. And so after this, you know, we started like talking more and like kind of building that like mentor-mentee relationship. And then that's how I ended up as a Onsulting mentee and, you know, meeting all these amazing people.
That's awesome. Isn't that funny how life works out? That's full circle, how you go from like looking at his content to now you're a part of it. So that's great. So kind of like, you know, what are some of the things you've been working on with, you know, now a part of Onsulting? Like what are some initiatives, things that you've been working on to kind of, you know, help bridge that gap and, help other underdogs turn into winners?
Yeah. So, starting off with being on that July speaker series, after that, I was able to, continue using LinkedIn and like using like the consulting community to find other opportunities. So a couple of things that I've been involved with since then. Through LinkedIn, a career coach at the University of Texas at Dallas contacted me, and he was really interested in my content that talked about recruiting during COVID. And so I was able to give like a webinar, like hour-long kind of like presentation / Q&A to a bunch of like his students at UTD about recruiting during COVID. So that was like my first thing that I did like after the consulting speaker series. And then I did a couple of different podcasts as well, talking about recruiting and networking. And these, like some of these were through consulting, some of them were just through LinkedIn, people who contacted me. And then, doing this podcast, and then also just kind of by word of mouth, like the more events that you do, like the more people who see your content, like the more people who are going to reach out to you for like opportunities. And so one of like the latest things that I've been doing is in the Dallas area, there's a lot of like Asians. And so there's like a like Dallas like Chinese community. And so kind of through word of mouth, they were interested in like me like presenting like a seminar about recruiting and like using LinkedIn effectively. And so that's like another thing that I've been doing, just like kind of giving these presentations. I have like 2 sets of slides that I just like reuse for all of them. Yeah, like I have it like kind of like all memorized now. So it's kind of fun, being able to help other people as well as like kind of get your personal, like expand your personal brand and like get your like message out there. So, it's like a win-win for everyone. And it's, I like seeing other people succeed in, their like personal and professional lives. So it like makes me happy to be able to help other people like navigate the process that is like really confusing.
No, that's awesome. And I think, and kudos to you. And I'm glad to have you part of the Wall Salt League fam too. But no, it's like, I think there's like this negative stipulation when it comes to like LinkedIn, right? Because, you tend to see like a lot of people who just post the aftermath. Like, I have, pleasure to like, I'm now interning at Google, or like, I'm interning at like some place, right? But it's like, and so I think LinkedIn does get a bad rap, as sometimes people just make it their highlight reel. But I think when you talk about like, your personal brand and things, like you're kind of you are paying it forward. And I think that's important, because I think, ultimately it's like, end of the day, it's like, we all have our own journey and experiences. And the more you can kind of share that and kind of enable and empower others to do the same, I think we're all winning ultimately. So it's great to see you do that. And I kind of guess like, have you like faced any pushback at all from like, personal branding stuff at all, or no? It's like all been positive.
Yeah, I think there hasn't been like a lot of pushback, since I think like most of my content is more like tips. And
Sure.
So I definitely think I definitely agree that there is a lot of pushback with, the like kind of success and like highlight reel sort of posts. And so I think like personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with like, feeling proud of like an accomplishment and like posting.
Exactly.
And I think, like people definitely deserve like the congratulations and like the like support of their network when they do have these opportunities. I think, like even if they just like post that they had like they got this opportunity, like I think that's fine, But if people do want to encourage like more conversation, I think like not just posting their success, but also like the steps that they took to get there, and like maybe some of the setbacks they faced. I think that makes it more relatable and more human, and like encourages more people to like comment and like connect and like respond and ask them for advice. And so this just I think that just like is like leads to a more productive conversation. So yeah, personally, I haven't really seen any pushback so far, but I mean, I'm sure I'm going to like get people who think my advice is like dumb and but I think it's usually like the interactions with people that I've had on LinkedIn are pretty positive, and I haven't really encountered haters yet. So
Well, I'm glad because at the end of the day, it's like anyone can be keyboard warrior. Anyone can kind of knock someone for doing something, but at the end of the day, like you're doing your thing, you're
mhm,
helping others out. Like there's really nothing else to it, right? So that's great. I kind of as we're coming to the end, Bihan, I kind of just one last question.
mhm.
What advice would you give to a budding freshman who's starting off college in this COVID, remote time, who ultimately wants to break into big tech? Like, kind of, how would you go about things, knowing what you know now as a freshman?
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. So I guess if it's like big tech specifically, there are like a few different things that you should be thinking about. So first, joining different clubs on campus where they're focused on like tech or like entrepreneurship or CS, whatever it is that's like related to like your area of interest. I think this is something that, I didn't really do that well my freshman year. I definitely wish I had like joined more organizations and clubs instead of like just like making friends in like different like divisions. Like I think
Right.
clubs are a great way to like meet even more people than you could like organically. And so clubs also have like the benefit of like having seniors and like upperclassmen who've gone through the recruiting process who can give you advice and like refer you eventually. So building your community in like these different clubs, and then on like a more like personal level of what you can do, you can also start networking early on. Like networking, like an ongoing process. Like you don't like I know I said like you should start networking like 3 to 4 months before your like job application opens, but you really should be doing this like all the time because you never know where like a connection or like a relationship is going to lead you in the future. And so, starting out freshman year, like you have so much time, you have like the freshman card, like everyone wants to help you, like everyone wants to give you advice. And so you can really take advantage of this and learn about, different companies, different industries. Like maybe you discover that you actually don't want to go into like big tech, or maybe you want to like do, like marketing or like consulting instead. And then like just keeping an open mind. And it's like never too early to like start interview prepping, I guess, on like a more like technical side. But I think it mostly is just talking and like meeting a lot of different people and learning from their experiences. And I think the most effective way to do that is like through clubs and organizations. So virtually it's probably pretty hard, but if you put in the effort to like connect with these people, like a lot of the time people are very happy to like talk to you and help you out. You just need to like take that first step and like take the initiative to like reach out to them.
No, definitely. I think, as you said, like in college, this is the time to figure out what you want because your interests are going to change so much, during those 4 years. So I definitely think it's important to, try everything and, talk to people in different industries, different lines of work so you can figure out, hey, is this something that I want to do or not? So that's great. And I guess kind of, as we wrap up, Bihan, where can the audience find you at? Like kind of, social media, LinkedIn, kind of where can people connect and find you?
Yeah. So happy to connect on LinkedIn. I should pop up as Bihan Jiang. I don't think there's that many other people with my name, so should be pretty easy to find on LinkedIn. Also connect with me on YouTube. I have my name I don't know if you can see my full name. Let me check if I can edit this.
Maybe you should abbreviate your last name. There you go. Oh,
yeah. Yeah, so you can find me on YouTube at To Be Honest, so TOBIHANEST, where I post videos about networking, internships, recruiting, success, etc. And so, like, always feel free to leave comments there because I will respond to literally every single one of those comments.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Bihan. It's been a pleasure. Keep up the great work, and we look forward to seeing what you keep doing moving forward with consulting and career-wise.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was great talking with you today and like answering questions, and hope people found this helpful.
Definitely, I'm sure they did. All right, everyone. This is Adi signing off from the Virtual A Game Studio. It's been a pleasure again, Bihan, and we'll be back next week with the next speaker. All right. Talk to you guys later.